All right, let's talk about changing a water pump on an R320. This one happens to be an '08. And I'll talk at the end of the video about the '08s. They switched from an 8-rib belt and pulley setup to a 7-rib, but I'll go over all that at the end. This car had 125,000 miles, and the pump failed driving down the highway, and I think that's becoming more common to just fail like that. Cheaper and cheaper bearings, maybe less tolerance for water getting past the seal. So anyway, this looks like it's going to be a tough job. Looks tricky. You can see the water pump right there. That's the pulley. And it looks like it's going to be a tough job, but it's really not. There's some work you got to do. The throttle body's got to come off. These hoses got to get out of the way. So it looks like it's going to be a tricky job, but it's really not. I think the shop time is like 3 or 4 hours, and I think it can be done in about 5, including the refilling of the coolant and all that. So yeah. So first thing, of course, take that big plastic engine cover thing off the top. I usually just take those off and leave them off. I think they're kind of silly. The next thing, this I don't think has to come off, but I think it helps. And you got a bolt there and bolt there, and then it just pulls straight up. It has a boss with an O-ring on it that just goes down into the manifold. So that's easy. This pipe, don't bother taking it loose because it's rigid on both ends, so that doesn't help. The dipstick, I honestly don't remember if I took that off or not. It just goes straight down into the oil pan right there, but I really don't remember if I pulled that out or not. But the main thing, so you take this off. This just pulls apart. This one I could not get unattached on that end, but it's okay. You can just kind of rotate it, and because of the way it's curved, it'll rotate, out of the way that way or that way. Depends what you need. This one pulls right out of the air box, so that's easy. Put that aside. Then you got to get this hose that comes from the intercooler off, and you can see this wire, that's the lock, holds the pipe onto the throttle body. So on the back side of the throttle body, which I can't show you, there's kind of a loop in that wire. Stick a screwdriver into it and pry it back, and then there's a detent for that to stay in the unlocked position, and then you can pull the hose out of the throttle body. And then I had to kind of pull it out and then go down and back a little bit, and then kind of around like this to the front side of the throttle body. If you try to just pull it out and then out of the way like this, it wouldn't, because of the stuff that's in the way over here. So I pulled it out and kind of back and down, and then twisted it around. And that one, you'll have to kind of hold it out of the way to get at some of these bolts. So you'll see this bolt here goes through the plastic part and all the way through the throttle body to the manifold. But then this bolt just goes through the plastic into the throttle body. So there's, I think, 4 bolts on each, and a couple of them go through all the way to the manifold, and then a couple just go into the throttle body. And then the throttle body has some that don't go through, that just start at the throttle body and go into the manifold. And then for some reason, they've got these star head bolts. This one's a Torx, and then one that's just the throttle body itself is I think it was an 8 or a 10 millimeter. So that's kind of weird. 3 different head types. And then I think some of those bolts, or one of those bolts, is a different length. The star heads. So pay attention to those when you take them out. So yeah, get that hose off there and then work on the bolts that go through the plastic section. And then there's one bolt that's just in the throttle body, and that's the one that has the hex head. There's a bracket that supports the throttle body that is in the way of that bolt. But there's a little bit of space, and it looks like you could get the bolt out without moving that bracket. And that bracket, actually, because it's thin aluminum, you can push it out of the way a little bit. But there's not enough space for that bolt to come out. So, and unfortunately, I can't show you. I don't see where that bracket is at all. This might be it. Right there, that thin aluminum. That bracket is held on to, is attached to the block or the head or something with 3 bolts. Only the outer one can you get at, and what I did was loosened it a few turns, and that allowed the bracket to flex more so I could get that other bolt out. So that one bolt, you don't have to take it out, just loosen it a few turns just to the point where it's beyond the flex of the bracket, and that allowed that last bolt of the throttle body to come out. So let's see. I can zoom in on. I think that's the bolt, right? Where is it? That's, I don't know if you can see the bolt there. That's the head of the bolt. Yeah. So I was not able to make a video or take pictures when I was doing the job. I had to do the job in a relative's garage and wasn't even sure I'd have the right tools because it was 250 miles from home. So I guess the first thing I should have mentioned was that the tensioner for the belt is down. Where is it? Okay, so that's the tensioner. If I can get my finger in the camera here. Right there is the bolt head for the tensioner. That is a 17, I want to say, 17 millimeters. So you can, let me zoom this out. So it's down here. That's a 12 point, so you have to have a 12 point socket in order for that to work. So yeah, you'll have to get the belt tension off, or get the belt off before you get to the water pump bolts. But anyway, once you get the throttle body off, and there's a wire harness on it here that, or let's see, actually it's right there. Even with this out of the way, I couldn't get that unplugged until the throttle body was completely unbolted. And the only reason really to unplug it is so that you can set the throttle body aside. So then, then you can get at the water pump, and that's where this pipe, all the bolts you can get out real easily. Some of them you have to see from up above here. Let's see if I can get the light. Well, anyway, some of them you can't see except from up above, like down through here, and that's where it would help for this to be out of the way. So there's good access to all the bolts, you just can't see them all. But this thing is in the way of one of them. So but I think between the back of it and the bolt, there's room for kind of a standard length socket and a quarter drive ratchet. But all I had was these long sockets in quarter drive, and I had no quarter drive ratchet, so then I had to have an adapter. And that one, I believe all those bolts are E10s. Yeah, E10. If you have a longer socket, then you can't get a straight shot at that bolt. So then what I had to do was to have my socket on the bolt and then my extension coming in kind of at an angle, and then I hoped and prayed that the bolt was not real tight. So I had to do this kind of a thing where I got the socket on the bolt, and then I had my extension coming in kind of at an angle like this. But again, I think with a more standard length E10 star socket and a quarter ratchet, there's space to get that behind this pipe. And even with this, I thought with this small diameter shank here that I could get a straight shot at it, and you can't. So the bolts were not very tight, and so I think even doing the angle thing like this should work. Then I was afraid I couldn't get it tight enough that way, and I even tried using this hex with a little crescent wrench on it. My concern was that I wouldn't get it tight enough, but it's not leaking, so I must have gotten it tight enough. So that's the only thing that's really tricky, is getting at that one last bolt that's up on the top. So yeah, overall it's not a bad job. There's just quite a few bolts holding the throttle body on, so that's kind of slow going. So that's really the worst of it. So now as far as the 7 rib and 8 rib belt thing goes, late in the 08 model year they switched. So the dealer can tell you, what serial number that change was. FCP, Euro, Pelican Parts, Auto House AZ, they can tell you. I believe on the Pelican Parts website, it doesn't ask for serial number or in the VIN. Just when you click on the different water pumps that they sell, then it says 8 rib or 7 rib. So if you have an 08, the best thing is just to look at the belt and count the ribs on it, and make sure that you're getting the right part. Napa's website was completely wrong, and even the before this number and after this number was backwards as to being a 7 or 8 rib. So I don't know where they came up with their numbers, but and it seemed like the 8 rib stuff is the hardest to find. Even in Seattle, the one Mercedes dealer I called did not have an 8-rib pump in stock. The parts are plentiful, you know, on the online retailers, so it's not like they're not out there, but I think with just so few of these diesel, the OM's, what is it, 642, just so few of the 8-rib cars on the road that they don't stock them. I don't know, and I'm not sure if finding the belt is also going to be more difficult, you know, finding it locally in stock at a dealer or even at a place like Napa or any European parts stores. Nobody I called in the Seattle area had parts. So I did not change the belt on this. Yeah, I probably should have. I went through the records later and found that it doesn't have a whole lot of miles on it. Same with the idler pulleys and tensioners. You know, especially if you have 8-rib stuff, then it would be a good idea to change all of that at once. And with the idlers and the tensioner, really important to make sure you get the right width. I read on a forum a guy had belt changed and they put the narrower 7-rib idler on it, and the belt, he went through 2 or 3 belts until they figured out what was wrong. So 06, 07 for sure you have the 8-rib. 08, then you got to count the ribs, look at what you got, and make sure you get the right parts. So anyway, I don't know if the Blue Tech, you know, how much of this stuff is different on the Blue Tech. So you're on your own as far as that goes. But at least for the CDI diesels in an R class, this is how you do the water pump. And again, it's not a bad job. So good luck.